Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the ReptiChat podcast. It's been a while since I've done a traditional episode, so I'm excited to get back to it today. We've got a wonderful guest on today who I'm very excited to speak with. But we've got a few bits and bobs before we invite our guest on. So first up, what is going on with the snake sales / new reptile rethinking my life transition period? I've put a deposit down on a trio of a new species, which are going to be joining me very soon. To be fair, they're ready. I'm not. So as soon as I'm ready, they'll be coming. I have ordered all of the wood for 2 large vivariums that I'm building, and that should be here next week, so I can get started building them. And then once they're together, I can get the glass ordered, and then worry about what I'm doing on the inside of them. So I'm hoping to do some fancy backgrounds and stuff. So if that's something you want me to do, like a vloggy type video to go on YouTube, let me know in the comments below. I'm sort of umming and ahhing about doing it, but a few people have said to do it. Selling of the snakes is going pretty well. I sold the majority of animals I was looking to get rid of at the ARC show. I met some really nice people as well, lots of listeners. So if you are listening and I spoke to you at ARC, hello. And if I bumped into you, or this is the first time you're listening and I saw your ARC as well, thank you very much for coming to say hello. Marv and the team that organised the ARC show did an absolutely fantastic job as well. It was really, really good. I'm looking forward to the next one. I have got 7 snakes left to go as well. I've got a couple of normal and fire hatchlings, and I've got some really big adult females left. So drop me a message if you want to, because they've got to go. And yeah, I prefer them to go to somebody that I know that are a good home. I'm mumbling already. I'm going to dip in and out of comments today as well. I don't normally dip in and out of comments, but as my audience is growing nicely on the lives and you guys are chatting away in the comments, I will try and dip in and out. Who's in the comments I can see at the moment? We've got Ken from Viv Visions and Fiona as well. So thank you very much for being there, guys. If you are watching, feel free to drop a comment. Finally, before we get on today's episode, this is the sort of last traditional episode of the year. Don't worry, there's still going to be podcasts, but as of the 1st of December, I'm publishing something that I've been working on with some guests since mid-October. And I'm sort of announcing it now. So that is going to be called the 12 Pods of Christmas. So you're going to get 12 short podcasts, roughly 12 to 15 minutes long. One almost every day. It doesn't quite work out every other day, sorry. So they start on December 1st and the last one's on Christmas Eve. They are all pre-recorded and they have been hilarious to record, and I cannot wait to release them. And then after Christmas Eve, there's normally a bit of a gap until I start the next podcast. But if you are watching now and I managed to push some buttons correctly, I am on New Year's Eve going to be, let me see if I can get up on the screen. Hopefully it will appear if I can remember what I'm doing. There we go. So yeah, that is New Year's Eve, 5:30 p.m. live. Myself and 4 guests, as long as my laptop doesn't crash, which it could do, are going to be bringing you the big fat ReptiChat quiz of the year. That's right. I'm bringing you an animal-based quiz show, podcast type thing for your eyes and your ears. And that's what I'm saying on that. The stream is already listed on YouTube, so you can already go and click the reminder button, so that way you won't miss it. If I am clever enough and remember to do it, once I've finished the live stream, I'll go back and edit this. So if you're watching on repeat, there should be a card in the corner, so you can also push that button. That's if I remember to do it. So yeah, December is going to be mad. But I've had a lot of fun recording the episodes, and I know that the guests have had a lot of fun as well, and to be quite honest, it's been absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, so it's going to be fun. Make sure you are there. Moving on, I am super excited for today's guest. If you have been following me on Instagram for a while, you will have seen that I've been trying to find a frog keeper for ages. Today's guest keeps a selection of amphibious animals, frogs. What's the word? I don't know what I've written down here. they keep some frogs. It's really good. She has an MSc in zoo biology, and she also works alongside reptiles and research to help create content which educates and inspires. You may know her as Banoffee Pie Projects, but so without any further ado, let's welcome Ellie Hill of Hills Herptiles to the podcast. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I clearly can't speak today because it's been a little while since I've done a podcast, so apologies for me tripping over my own words as the show goes on today. But yeah, it's lovely to have you. And again, I've been looking for a frog person for ages, so I am super excited to chat frogs today.
That's right. I'm always happy to talk about frogs.
So if you haven't listened before, I like to start every guest episode off with a little section called Get to Know. It helps break the ice a little and gives the listeners a bit of an insight into the person behind their social media page. So if you're ready, we'll get straight into it. Brilliant. So what was your first exotic pet?
One that no one should start with, and that was a Yemen chameleon.
I've got a Yemen chameleon, yeah, and I also would agree with you. Don't ever start. Don't get them. To be honest, they're hard work.
Yeah. He was a rescue. He was literally like going for free, and I took him on, and I learned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not as nice as you think they would be. Either mine's horrible. He just bites all the time.
Be respected. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the most unusual species you've ever kept?
Probably caliber pythons.
Nice. Favorite species currently in your collection?
Oh God, I can't. They all have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. To be fair, I don't think I could pick one. That's like picking one of my favorite dogs. Out of the three of them, I couldn't pick one. I could definitely pick one. My wife might be listening. I'll get in trouble. Money, space, time, legality, no issue. What is a species you'd love to have the opportunity to keep?
Nothing like that would probably be exciting to most people. I've always wanted like carpet chameleons. Like, it's not a big species. It's not something that's like maybe as exciting as someone might think, but I think they're just amazing.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. And in your opinion, what is the most underrated exotic pet?
Probably just the stuff that we see as beginner. Like, I don't think that they should be labeled as something that's like beginner and throwaway.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Right, and then moving on to the this or that section, it's exactly as it sounds. So, beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Sun or snow?
Snow.
Vacation or staycation?
Staycation.
Night in or night out?
In.
And early bird, night owl, or permanently exhausted pigeon?
Probably the pigeon, if we're being honest.
Yes, most people are the pigeon. And finally, the most important question that everybody is wanting to know is, what is your favourite biscuit?
Probably boring, like bourbon.
I love a bourbon. That I would not. I think plain digestive is a boring biscuit, or a rich tea. I think a bourbon is up there. So we all know a little bit more about you, Ellie, but could you just give us a history lesson, really? Who is Ellie Hill? What was your first experience with an exotic animal, and sort of how has that taken you from then all the way to where you are now?
I've kind of been like in the animal industry since I was 14. I kind of started with wildlife rehab. We had one local to me, and then I entered Sparshot College, and I literally got nabbed onto the exotics team. Like, I was working with Mantella frog. I got kind of taken under my wing by a guy called Josh there, and I just absolutely got mind blown by everything that was there. And then from there, it's kind of spiraled.
Yeah, it does seem to be quite a common spiral for most reptile keepers. So, what was your sort of first? What was your first sort of pet that you went, you know what, I want to be a reptile keeper, as opposed to like, oh, I want a lizard?
I think I've always wanted to just have like a collection, if that makes sense. I've never I never was like that one animal and then got it and then decided to like keep going. I just, as soon as I kind of entered that world, I realized how many things there were that you could have, and that's picking the first one was the difficult part.
Well, yeah, I want to get dart frogs at the moment, but there's so many different types, and I've got space for one, so I don't know what I'm going to choose. But that's a problem for later on in life.
Pick one that you can have multiple species in, because then you don't have to dedicate to just one.
Yeah, well, that's
It's like the strawberry ones, you can only have the strawberry ones.
I'm hoping to do a communal tank with some morning geckos as well, so there's got to be something that will work with them. But we'll see. I've got a while yet. So what are you currently keeping?
So I have a Jackson's chameleon. I have a group of Calabar pythons. I have 6 rescue royal pythons, 2 bearded dragons, a crested gecko, 3 milk frogs, 2 rescue white tree frogs, and a Pac-Man frog. I think that's everyone. So.
So quite an eclectic mix as well. It's quite a nice mix you've got there. Obviously today, as the title says, we are mainly going to focus on the frogs, because I don't really know anything about frogs except they're really, I like them. They make cool noises. They come in millions of different colors. They do all sorts of stuff. So a quick scroll through your Instagram. You obviously are very passionate about all the animals that you have, but there's a lot of focus on the frogs as well. So what is it specifically about frogs that makes you tick?
I love the fact that we all started off as a frog, if you believe in evolution. Like, we were amphibians that came out of the water. And so I kind of love the fact that they're like a capsule of that time that has lasted. So in a sense, they were here before us. I love the fact that they are so alien to us, but also that I feel their welfare is really easy to meet. So, because some of the species that I keep, I feel like, am I doing enough? But with my frogs, I generally feel like they live a wonderful life and they have no concerns.
Yeah, that's a nice thing as a keeper as well. I know on the podcast a lot recently, I've been chatting to people about what are we doing and are we providing enough, which is one of the reasons I'm getting rid of basically everything and starting again. So the fact that you're happy with the frogs and you feel like the frogs are perfectly happy is a really good thing. So do you have a favourite of the species that you're keeping at the moment?
My favourite frog is the milk frogs.
Okay. And why are the milk frogs your favourite?
They've just got such cute little personalities.
To be fair, they are gorgeous. Looking at your pictures as well, they're really personable type.
Yeah, he just is so interactive. He's so goofy. He has the most ridiculous sprints of energy, just crashes around. It's just
That's fantastic. So if you can generalize, please do. But if not, we'll talk about milk frogs specifically. But what is the general care under the umbrella? Because I know there's a lot going on. But what sort of setups are you keeping them in? What sort of temperatures? What's the feeding regime? If you're explaining to a beginner, as I am, I don't know where I'm going, but you get the question.
So essentially, frogs have that amphibious skin, so it's porous. So at all times, you've kind of got to, for the most part, there are some desert species, but you want to keep humidity. Generally, most species somewhere between 70 to 100%, and you want spikes in that. But things like the white tree frogs are from Australia, so they can take lower humidity ranges. I controversially keep in mesh enclosures, and that is because I have all of my reptiles in one room, and so my room humidity sits at 70%.
So when you say mesh enclosures, do you mean the ReptiBreeze enclosures, a bit like what you keep a chameleon in?
Yeah, so I have those. I've kitted them out with bamboo sides and things like that. And generally, because we think of humidity, we think that they need to be humid all the time, but you want to be able to let that enclosure breathe. And I found with the mesh enclosures, I can really spray them down, give them really nice humidity, and then it kind of dissipates, because in the glass ones, it kind of gets a bit stagnant. For me personally, I know a lot of people have a lot of success in it.
Yeah.
And then my room temperature, the ambient is around 24. So For most cases, people wouldn't need to provide heat, although I like to provide them basking because they should have a choice to bask.
Yeah.
It can be argued that they're thigmo-conforming, but I see basking behaviours, so it's nice to provide them with basking.
Yeah. It's better for them to have it and not ever use it than want it and it not be there available for them. So, and then what sort of temperature have you got your basking spots at? Is it different for each species, or is it you doing them all about the same?
I just provide them like a little 15-watt basking bulb, like a really small one. If I'm going to be honest, because they've got such massive mesh enclosures, I'm not really there like checking the temperature. But yeah, they probably sit around 27, 28 as basking spot.
Okay, yeah, so just like high end 20s, so a bit sort of similar to crested gecko sort of temperatures then.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same sense of the cresty, like as long as they can get away from it, then they'll kind of decide how warm they want to be.
Yeah. And then what sort of size are your setups?
So they're kind of they're 45 by 90.
Okay, yeah. So nice and tall, lots of climbing space for them. And then the feeding regime, from what I can see, I don't know much. To be fair, I wouldn't claim to know anything, but I have like dabbled a little bit. It seems, especially the whites, I don't know if that's the case for all of them, but the frogs are really greedy. So if there's food, they will eat it. So is it a case of, are you feeding them every day and they just eat what they want, or do you have to limit it, otherwise they end up like being able to be rolled around because they're that large?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many frogs that are silly obese online. They are opportunists. They don't self-regulate. They will just eat and eat and eat and eat. So with the babies, when they start off tiny, they have continuous feeding, because actually a big killer for them is that they don't stumble upon enough prey items and they waste away. However, when they kind of get to adult size, I'm maybe feeding mine once to twice a week. It depends. I'm not really that strict on like feeding. I'll kind of notice when he's hungry, and that's when I'll offer him food. But apart from that, yeah, the biggest problem, I mean, some of the dumpy frogs you see, they're so fat, the fat is actually covering their eyes. It just,
it looks cute, but it's at the same time it's horrible, isn't it? Like, it's when you see a fat puppy, like they're cute because they're podgy, but at the same time you're like, that poor dog.
Yeah.
And then what sort of things are you feeding them? Is it they get quite a nice mixed diet, and are you dusting it at the same time? I'll add that both in some questions.
Yeah, so I feed a variety, so whatever I kind of get hold of, because I've got such a large collection of things that eat bugs. So I breed dubia roaches, so vast majority of the time I'll probably reach for that. But they have silkworms, locusts. I don't feed them things like mealworms and morio worms, because they don't have necessarily teeth, so they have a hard bone, and sometimes they'll have hard bone spikes. But when you're talking about like swallowing a whole morio worm, they have the hard pincers and things. I just worry about damage. But apart from that, then they eat pretty much whatever I can offer them.
Okay, I know you're supplementing them.
Yeah. So all of the frogs have UVB lighting, and so for the vast majority, I'll give them calcium dusted things. But then I also have multivits and calcium pro and all that kind of stuff as well that I do kind of on a
and that's the same for all of them, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's yeah. So again, quite basic care, but at the same time, there's a lot to think about if you are brand new into it.
Yeah, and there's like hidden dangers that people don't really realize. So where they've got really porous skin, they're actually really sensitive to toxic shock. So you might have a candle in the room, you might spray your deodorant, you might cook with a Tefal pan. These are all things that put chemical in the air that can instantly kill a frog. So they're really vulnerable to it. So my room is literally like a no-go zone for all of these things.
Yeah. Oh, so I didn't know that. I had no idea. That's really interesting. So obviously they have got very porous skin. So not you. My brain's just not working today. I'm really sorry. When you see people handling them online and like things that I've seen, if you are handling them, they always say to do it with wet hands as well. So I presume that's just like create a barrier from whatever's on your skin to the frogs. Do you handle yours a lot at all? Do they? I don't really. What's the deal with handling?
So yeah, the oil on your hands is actually really bad for their skin, and you can cause sores and all sorts of different problems for them. I don't ever really handle them unless I have to. They don't enjoy it. I don't need it from them. The only time I really handle them is to move them. And I just clean around them. That seems less stressful to them than actually picking them up.
Yeah.
If you are going to do it, then at least wet your hands. But most common practice is put on vinyl gloves, not latex, because again, latex is bad for them. So vinyl gloves, and then also wet those as well, so you're not drying them out.
Okay. Yes. Okay. That's a good thing. To be fair, I've always got a set of gloves around as well for in the future. Talking of in the future, so obviously I've mentioned that I'm having a sort of whole reshuffle at home, and that I wanted some frogs. So I really want dart frogs. They're going to come at some point, but I've got a 45 by 45 by 60 enclosure that will be empty, and my 12-year-old daughter has told me that's got to have frogs in it, and I'm not brave enough to argue with her. So we've been looking at red-eyed tree frogs, white tree frogs, and milk frogs as well. Obviously, I know nothing. So we will, of course, do our research and stuff before we eventually dive in. But what would you recommend to start with, and why would you recommend that?
In terms of like species that are solid, your white tree frogs are better.
Yeah.
Like I say, they are from Australia. They tend to be hardy and more likely to be forgiving of mistakes. But my general advice is you're not silly. If you do your research, get the one that really interests you.
Yeah.
Because my whites are rescues and they're 8 years old, and to think that they can live to 20, it's a long time to commit to something.
Yeah.
So just go with what you think is.
Yeah. And do you find with the whites and the milk frogs, not the red eyes, but with the whites and the milk frogs, are they out sort of on display as often as each other? And because we generally don't tend to handle the animals we've got here, apart from her leopard gecko, but everything else is sort of a bit like a tropical aquarium. So you sort of look at it. So we don't want to be looking at like a nice planted viv. We'd like to see something in there occasionally.
So my milk frog is always out. He's never away. Even during the day, he's sat somewhere out in the open.
Yeah.
The whites, I've only had them for a short time, but they tend to be out and about, crashing about during the night. But sometimes, for the most part, in the day, they're hidden. You won't see them.
Right. Okay. And then another thing that I noticed online, I saw YouTube, so I sometimes I take stuff with a pinch of salt. But I was looking at like how people were setting up their enclosures and stuff, and it seems there's two polar opposites from what I can see. So there is either like an enclosure and the bottom half is a paludarium full of water, or there's no like water at all, and they're getting a spray down every day or a few times a day with a misting system. Are there any pluses or minuses to having like a paludarium type setup or a misting setup? I don't know how to finish.
I would always provide your frogs with something to soak in. They, even though I spray them down and things like that, they're always soaking. They naturally drink through their cloaca, so they'll absorb it and keep hold of it. And then when they're frightened or things like that, they'll let it go. But for the vast majority of the time, they'll want to have a store of that.
Right.
Just relying on misting isn't giving them that opportunity.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
The problem with the paludarium setup is that you want to make sure that water is fresh, because again, where they're so sensitive, if you're not doing regular water changes, if you're not checking how high the ammonia is and things like that, then you're risking things. So I just have a big water bowl that I swap out and change. But you could do a paludarium setup, just treat it like a fish tank.
Yeah, okay. That makes perfect sense. Because one of the things I've seen, I know that I'm really struggling with my brain today. I know that when I was looking into dart frog care, a lot of people say don't include water with them, or if you like, don't include a water feature, so to speak, just have small shallow dishes of water because they drown, which I was like, that's mad. I just can't imagine a frog drowning. But so I imagine that's not a problem so much with the white tree frog, so to speak.
Yeah, so they naturally would access water points, as in bromeliads.
Yeah.
So the plants that gather the water, and that's their water source, they would be up off the ground floor. So with those, your water source is probably going to be your like bromeliads and things like that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So Do you have any advice for people that are watching or listening that maybe want to get their first frog? Not necessarily the ones with consumed, but to a frog as a whole. Where would they where would you advise them to start?
As in what? Sorry.
So there's people listening, hopefully, and they've gone, you know what, I really want a frog, but that's as far as they've got. So if you would give them advice, some advice, what would be, I don't know, some words of advice for them to even start their journey? So where could they look to research stuff? Because obviously there's so much contradictive information on the internet. Where is it? Would you recommend?
So I would first think about what you want out of a frog. So if you want how much space you're willing to give them, how much commitment, because my Pac-Man frog is probably the easiest one. He doesn't need any friends. He's on his own. He does need space, but not as much. He's only in like a little 2x2x2. And he's relatively easy. You just feed him and change his water bowl and give him a spray down. If you wanted more attractive things like the tree frogs, then you're looking at more commitment, more space. You're going to have to keep more than one, and that kind of dynamic comes into play. In terms of researching, there are papers out there, like research papers, if you want to go hardcore on them, like the milk frog ones have a specific care written paper. For looking for guides and information, hey, come to me. No, like, I'll be fine. Just ask me. But like, look at the advice that you're being given and kind of think about whether or not the care is coming from ease or not. Because a lot of Pac-Man frog advice, for example, they say no lighting, just a heat mat, keep it on a sponge. That's no good for an animal that burrows, has a really highly calcified skull, so they really do need UVB, and there's so many out there with metabolic bone disease and things like that. So kind of read lots of different resources and kind of come to your own conclusion. There's no right way of doing it, but kind of think about whether or not the advice is for your ease or the frog. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. There is a question on the chat from Viv Visions. He says, do you use reverse osmosis water for your tree frogs and milk frogs?
No, but I do use like a dechlorinator. So the only reason that I don't use RO is because it takes everything out of the water, and that includes the good things like the calcium, your minerals, and all of those kind of things as well.
Right, okay. I hope that answers your question, Ken. That makes perfect sense. I'm learning so much today, which is really, really exciting. But to be honest, because I don't know that much, I don't know much. I didn't have a huge selection of questions because I am so uneducated. So what are some things to look out for? Say I'm going to look for my first frog, and I've decided on we'll go for a tree frog, a white tree frog, because I imagine that's what we're going to end up with. What should I be looking out for before I purchase one?
So I would look at how they're keeping them. So when you go in there, have they got lots of them in a tiny enclosure? Because you're probably looking at someone who isn't caring so much.
Right.
The size of them, don't be fooled by getting into the little tiny ones, because what they probably are is a just metamorphized froglet, and they go through a massive change, because when they're tadpoles, they eat mainly vegetation, and then as they move to a froglet, they're now eating a just insectivorous diet, and that is when there's huge fatalities because their digestive system hasn't developed properly and things like that. So you want to make sure that you get a well-established one, so one that is at least bigger than your thumb.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and it just saves heartache, because when you start out that tiny, it is just accepted that some of them do pass away, no matter even if you provide the best care. And especially when they're that tiny, you have to have a special, so right now my little my baby milk tree frogs are in little sterile setups with paper towels, just because you really have to make sure that they're eating.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense as well. They are. I thought they were all relatively hardy, but it sounds like they are really quite delicate.
So they are hardy in their own sense, but at the same time, in their own parameters. If you go out of those parameters, then they can very quickly go downhill.
Yeah, I suppose like some of the like you said at the beginning, I don't like to call them. I agree with you. Like the beginner species, so your corn snakes, leopard geckos, bearded dragons. If you do something wrong, it takes quite a long time to have a drastic effect. But from what I'm gathering, sort of with the frogs, you don't have too long. So if you make a mistake, like they go downhill very quickly.
Hmm.
And I imagine because they are so delicate, so to speak, that if they go downhill, is it quite hard to then bring them back from whatever they're suffering with?
Yeah, so one of the big problems is finding a vet who even knows how to treat them.
Yeah.
And then some things, you just can't come back from. And it's either because you haven't noticed soon enough, and there are species that hides it really well, or it's just a train wreck.
Yeah.
Things like,
What
for
are some?
example, I was going to say things like they can go into like a state of like brumation from getting too dry, so such as a Pac-Man frogs and things like that. If you don't notice that quick enough, then there is like really hard recovery back. For example, things like red leg, that's when you don't keep them in an environment that's clean, and that can be from fungal or bacteria. And it's just finding a vet because they'll need like antibiotics and all of that kind of thing. They're so delicate, like you can't just give them any old antibiotics. It has to be like a frog safe one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like they're very like you said, you're cooking with a Tefal pan or spraying deodorant. If that's going to do some really bad detriment, I imagine again, like giving them the wrong antibiotics could very quickly again make something that was something a little bit bad in something very, very bad.
And then I don't know if you've ever heard of like chytrid fungus.
I haven't.
So it's this fungal disease that is wiping out pretty much all species in the wild. It does occasionally pop up in captivity as well, because some species of frogs can be carriers, such as the Xenobus, the African clawed frogs. So when you are getting frogs from pet shops, it's something that you need to be aware of. And you can get PALS Labs let you do like a swab test. And basically what it does is the chytrid fungus thickens their skin and it stops them from being able to breathe through their skin. So it like slowly suffocates them. And again, it's one of those things that you need to test for it, and then very quickly treat it if it does crop up, because otherwise it can wipe everything.
Yeah. And are these things that are coming from, obviously they're now in the sort of hobby at home, but is it something that it comes from a wild caught animal? Are there a lot of wild caught animals in the frog world, or are they generally captive bred stuff?
I have seen wild caught things. You're pretty safe if it's a milk frog, red-eyed tree frog, like those kind of things. They're pretty much all captive bred. But things like your waxy monkey tree frogs and things like that, a lot of them are wild caught.
Right. Okay. And then obviously they can bring all sorts into the home as well, which is another thing to look out for. No, that's yeah. There's loads of things that I didn't think about, to be honest, with frogs. I thought it was just a case of pop them in an Exoterra and give them a spray every now and then. So yeah, that's really cool. What are people saying in the chat? Let's have a quick look. Hello, Liam from Reptiles and Research. Nice to have you in the chat. And Viv Visions is saying, I'm a Pac-Man frog, honey whites, 2 Azurus, and frogs are my favourite of the amphibious ones. I'm looking into an African bullfrog. They get massive as well, don't they?
Yeah, when I went to see Ashley in his shop recently, he had a little baby one, and he was showing me his adult male. The temptation.
Yeah, don't they get to like the size of a dinner plate?
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, and so I know we're sort of going around in circles, but back to diet, I've seen a lot of things of people. I don't know so much the white tree frogs, but Pac-Man frogs getting fed rodents.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a normal thing? Should people not be doing that? Should they be on insects mainly? What's your view on that, or what is the rules?
So where they come from in the wild, they would literally eat anything, fish, aquatic invertebrates like your shrimps and things like that, insects, little baby birds, whatever they could get hold of. However, the problem is that a lot of people in captivity, they just feed them a pinky, and they can get over protein in their diet, which causes things like the frog version of cataracts. So you literally get a film over the eyes where they just can't cope. And there are so many Pac-Man frogs that I see that are horrifically obese.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because they're very round. So I imagine, to be fair, for the untrained eye, I imagine being able to tell the difference between a big round Pac-Man frog and a fat round Pac-Man frog. I don't know how obvious it would be to tell if you were unaware. And I imagine there's a lot of people. Go on, carry on.
Yeah, if you actually look at wild photos, so there are 3 species of Pac-Man frog in captivity at the moment. So I have a Cranwelli, there's an ornate or an ornata, and there's also a cornuta as well. So the vast majority of people will either have a Cranwelli or an ornuta. But you can look at those wild photos and it's basically a head with a little body and like little legs. What we see in captivity is a massive body with the little head and the little legs that are just sticking out. Yeah. So you kind of almost want the frog to look like it needs to be fed, and that is what they naturally are like.
Okay, I'm going to go and do some Googling after this. I want to see some wild.
Like when you actually see the wild ones, you're like, wow.
Yeah, because in captivity they almost look like tennis balls with eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's again. See, I would never have known that. Oh, I'm loving this. There's a lot. Well, yeah. There's a lot of frog stuff that I didn't know. Apparently, I didn't know anything about frogs, which that's not a bad thing. It means that I have got a lot to learn, and I've got plenty of time to do it. So that is a good thing. What is going on in the chat? My phone is flicking along next to me. It's Ken saying exactly what you just said. So yeah, Pac-Man frogs are ambush predators and they'll eat anything that walks past them. So are there? Because I am uneducated on frogs, I am not going to lie. I'm struggling to think of any other questions to ask you. So what frog things haven't I touched on that you think are important to if you want to keep frogs or if you are keeping frogs?
I don't know really. I think the way that so a lot of people push for bioactive setups, for example, and my caution is a lot of people set up bioactives and then they don't check the soil. So where frogs are more likely to have toxic shock and things like that, if you don't set up a bioactive properly, you just start setting yourself up to have an animal that is being exposed to high levels of acidity in soil and things like that. So I don't actually keep bioactive, I keep planted, because then I can change things out, I can clean things properly and things like that. I'm not saying that's the best way to go about it. I'm just saying if you're going to set up bioactive, you really have to think about your soil quality and things like that.
Yeah. So how would you define the difference between a planted enclosure and a bioactive? Because I know that there's millions of different ways of doing bioactive enclosures. When people say bioactive in my head, I think drainage layer, some soil, some springtails, and some isopods.
Yeah, exactly that. So if you've got an enclosure that's got layers, and you're adding your invertebrates like your springtails, your isopods, earthworms, all of that kind of stuff, then it's technically bioactive. And then there's different ranges of bioactive in that. Are you poo picking? Are you just completely leaving them to it and things like that? And then planted is literally just you've got soil in there, and you've got plants and plant pots, or they might be planted as well, but you're fully maintaining and cleaning that, and you can do like soil changes and things like that.
Yeah, okay. And do you still have your drainage layer with your planted enclosures, just out of curiosity?
I don't know.
Okay. My Cresties are in a planted enclosure. It's sort of bioactive now, I guess. But when I first did it, I had no drainage layer in there at all, and I had to change the soil because like 4 inches were like a sloppy mess. And I hadn't noticed because it's on an automatic misting system. I was like, oh shit. So yeah, now it's got a hole in the bottom. I can drain the layer, drain it all if I need to. But yeah, no, that's interesting. And then, how often do you find that you're changing the soil? Is it as and when it needs it, or have you got like a set routine?
I tend to never do full clean outs. I will take out parts that are dirtied, if that makes sense. So if I see that something's been soiled somewhere, then I'll scoop out that section. Yeah.
And then just top it up when it's looking a bit low. And do you, another thing that I've literally just thought of now, because they're in planted enclosures, I find that I have to feed my plants occasionally when I'm doing watering and stuff. That with the frogs being so sensitive, are you feeding the plants as well, or are you like changing the plants out every now and then? So that, because my plants never seem to stay alive for more than a few months, and I have to like give them some extra love.
Yeah, so all of my vivs, they have LED lights for the plants as well as the frogs. And then, like I said, when they're just planted, I will take that plant out and then I might repot it and things like that. I won't be adding fertilizers or anything like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Again,
which is more difficult when you're wanting to do like dart frog enclosures that are all set up, because how can you take it in and out? So yeah, I get that.
Yeah, that's one thing I've got to think about, because I'm hoping to do like a full, like I'm hoping I'd never have to touch it really, apart from like feed it and do the odd poo pick. But I want there to be plants and stuff. I want there to be isopods and all that. So adding plants, because I've got like live plants in all of my enclosures. I think like apart from the snakes because they're in a rack at the moment. But like the leopard geckos and the crested specifically, I have to I feed the plants once every 6 weeks or so, because I find otherwise, even with the UVB and the LED lights and stuff, they tend to like brown out, or they look like they're dying, and a little bit of plant food and they all perk up again. But I don't know. To be fair, I think it's animal safe. It doesn't say keep away from animals, and my dogs have never done like nothing's died. And I've been doing it for 18 months, so I think it's safe. But the frogs are obviously very sensitive, so it's something I'll have to come up with.
I mean, it's something that you can email that manufacturer and say, is it amphibian safe? And then they'll be able to tell you whether or not they feel it is.
Okay, and that would be something that they have tested for, then I presume.
Yeah, they should know, because even if you're like using that fertilizer outside and things, they would have to have like an environmental awareness impact, surely.
Yes. I'm like, my brain is going to be so full of stuff. I didn't know that was a thing either. Cool. So I feel like I'm rambling a bit because I'm running out of questions to ask you. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want you to be sat here with me going all the time. So we are a little bit early, but I am going to start wrapping it up, because from what we've chatted about, I've learned a lot already. And I think if we keep going around in circles, I'm going to ask the same questions, and nobody wants to hear ask the same questions over and over again. So what I like to wrap up with is something called the ReptiChat Hall of Fame. Basically, it is a imaginary place. It's a bit like a museum, but it's designed for beginners or new people into the reptile keeping hobby. As they walk in, there's pedestals, and every pedestal has something that a previous podcast guest has left that they want to put in the Hall of Fame and say, like, here you go, use this, try this. It can be an item, piece of advice, like anything reptile related. So what would you like to add to your pedestal in the Hall of Fame?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. What have other people put in there?
So we've got like full spectrum LEDs. We had a Mikey and Mia, the parrot keepers. They popped. I can't remember the name of the product exactly, but it was like a clippable cup, so the parrots couldn't throw it around. We've had like calcium powder, lots of different things. So we've had a lot of advice as well. So people have said like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. What people said? Just killing the dead air with some talking for a minute. Find a mentor was one of the pieces of advice. So I think they were keeping some larger lizards, and it was find someone that can mentor you, so to speak.
I think mine would be do invest in a UVI reader, because honestly, it saved me so much money.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, because when I first started, when we got what did we get first? Our chameleon. So I've been keeping raws for ages, and they've been in racks, and I've never used UVB on them, and I know that's bad now, and I'm learning. But when we got our chameleon, I was like, right, I know chameleon's sensitive, so we got like the tubes and everything, and it's really cool. But when we bought them, the shop told us replace the tubes every 6 months, whatever, and it gets really expensive really quickly. And so I imagine with I need to buy one actually. I haven't got one, but I imagine. Go on, carry on.
I've realised that I will keep a UV bulb on an enclosure sometimes like a year and a half, And then it will just move down through the category. So my Pac-Man frog is at the bottom, and his UVI is 1 to just below 1. And my tree frogs, for example, are like a 2. My chameleon is somewhere like a 5. And so like you slowly bring it down so that bulb gets many lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. I hadn't even thought about doing that. I wonder how many wasted bulbs I've thrown away that were perfectly fine still.
That were probably absolutely perfectly fine and still in.
Probably. Arcadia just sat there rubbing their hands waiting for my next order. So we will add that to the Hall of Fame. A UVI gauge thing. Reader. That's the word I was looking for. Cool. So apologies for me mumbling and running out of brain today because I don't know what's going on with me, but I have really, really enjoyed the chat. So the only thing left to do really for you, Ellie, is to plug yourself. So where can people find you?
So I've set up a new YouTube channel that is Hills Herptiles. You can also find me under Reptiles and Research. Sometimes I appear there under Liam's channel. I also have my other account on Instagram, which is Bonoccupied Pythons as well. Bonoccupied Projects now.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I put all the links in the show notes below as well. So you can go and check all of those out and go and give a subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. So that's really exciting. So thank you very much for coming on today. And I'm going to say goodbye now, but thank you very much. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure we will catch up very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you. Well, I hope you all learned some riveting frog facts today. I have learned a lot more than I thought I needed to learn, and apparently there is a lot more to learn still. Apologies if you're still listening and you have put up with my mumbling, because I don't know what's going on with me today. My brain, as soon as I turned the camera on, just went and stopped working. This, like I said, is the last live episode today until New Year's Eve. But I will be every single 12 pods of Christmas episode will be a premiere on YouTube, and I'll be in the comments on every single premiere. I really, really hope you enjoy the Christmas podcasts, as they've been honestly such a laugh to record. I've got some great guests for the Christmas stuff as well. So yeah, that should be really good. And then, like I said at the beginning, New Year's Eve, 5:30 p.m, the big fat ReptiChat quiz of the year. That will be live with lots of guests, lots of animal related questions. And yeah, so before we disappear, if you are still listening and you haven't subscribed or followed or whatever you do on the audio platform you're listening to, it is a free feature and it massively helps. So please go and do that. And if you are on YouTube, please drop a comment, not on the live chat, but in the normal videos, because that also really, really helps. If you want to support the podcast a little bit more, just down below, there is a link to the Patreon page. So come and join the Repti Squad, where I will put all sorts of new animals and stuff going on there. And before I disappear, let's just have a quick check on the comments, see who is still there to the end. Fiona is saying, I've got stage fright. It might be, Fiona. The last few episodes have been pre-recorded, and it feels like an age since I did a proper live. And Michael is saying, don't watch the 12 pods of Christmas. But that doesn't matter. He might not even be a guest yet, and it was a good record. Last comment: did you record an episode, Fee? No, Fee is not on the 12 pods of Christmas, unfortunately. Not this year, anyway. So that is enough of that. Last but not least, if you want to keep up to date with what is going on with me or the podcast, go and check out the Instagram accounts, which are at Ben's Balls and at ReptiChat. In the new year, I will be phasing out at Ben's Balls, and everything will be moving on to at ReptiChat and at ReptiChat only. But go and give them both a follow for now, because I will update them all the time. So that is all from me today. Thank you very much. All that's left to do is say thank you very much, goodbye, and enjoy the Christmas episodes.